We all love the idea of waking up one morning feeling wildly inspired, deeply motivated, and ready to conquer the day. We imagine that great accomplishments begin with a spark, that burst of energy that pushes us into motion. But here's the hard truth. The most meaningful, long-lasting success doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with discipline. And discipline only comes alive when you know why you're doing something in the first place. Motivation is a feeling. It's emotion-driven, spontaneous, and often unreliable. It's like a guest that shows up when it wants, brings energy into the room, and then disappears without notice. We've all had days when we feel unstoppable. We plan, we execute, we get things done. But then the next day arrives, and the same motivation is gone. The circumstances are the same, the goals haven't changed, but the fire is out. That's the moment most people stop. They think something is wrong. They believe they have to wait for that feeling to come back before they act again. That's the mistake. See, motivation might get you started, but it is your why that keeps you going. Your why, your purpose, your reason, the thing that matters more than comfort or convenience. That's where real discipline is born. Discipline is the decision to act not because you feel like it, but because you know it matters. It's not glamorous. It doesn't get applauded in the moment. But it is the foundation beneath every success story we admire. Think of anyone who has achieved something extraordinary. Athletes, entrepreneurs, artists. They didn't rely on daily inspiration. They relied on clarity. They understood why they were doing what they were doing. And that understanding gave them the strength to keep showing up even when it was boring, painful, or uncertain. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man training for a marathon. He wasn't a runner. In fact, he had never run more than a few miles in his life. But something changed after a close family member fell seriously ill. That experience stirred something inside him, not just a desire to be fit, but a deep personal mission to raise awareness for a cause he suddenly cared about more than anything. And so he trained. Every morning at 5 a.m. while it was still dark, he laced up his shoes and hit the pavement. It didn't matter if it was raining, or if he had slept poorly, or if his muscles were sore. He ran. People would ask him, how do you stay motivated? And he would answer, I don't. I just remember why I started. That's the shift. When your actions are tied to a clear purpose, you no longer need to chase motivation. You don't have to force yourself out of bed with tricks or rewards. You just go. You go because it matters. Discipline without purpose is fragile. It's mechanical. You can stick to a schedule for a few weeks, maybe a month, but the first time things get difficult, you'll quit unless your efforts are anchored in something deeper. And when they are, when you are truly connected to the reason behind your work, discipline doesn't feel like a burden. It becomes a form of self-respect, a promise you keep with yourself. Now, some people hear this and feel discouraged. They think, well, I don't know my purpose yet. I don't have a big why. That's okay. Purpose isn't something you wait around for. It's something you uncover through effort. You don't need a perfect mission statement to begin. You just need a reason that matters more than your excuses. That might be your family, your future, your potential, your commitment to becoming someone your younger self would be proud of. You find your why by starting, by trying, by showing up even when you don't feel like it. And over time, that clarity grows. I once worked with a leader who said something I never forgot. He said, the moment I stopped asking what I wanted and started asking who I wanted to be, everything changed. That's what your why gives you, a vision of who you are becoming. And when that vision is clear, you don't need to be motivated to act. You just need to remember that every hard moment is shaping the person you've decided to become. Here's the thing. The world is filled with talented, intelligent, capable people who never live up to their potential. Not because they lack resources, not because they lack support, but because they wait for the right moment to act. They wait for inspiration to strike. They wait until they feel ready, and they never do. But the ones who force themselves to work hard, the ones who lead with purpose and act with discipline, they build a different kind of life. Not perfect, not always easy, but deeply meaningful. And over time, everything around them starts to align. Opportunities open, confidence grows, progress multiplies. Not because they waited for things to fall into place, but because they built the discipline to keep showing up until they did. If you want to change your life, don't focus on motivation. Don't chase energy, chase clarity. Ask yourself why your work matters. What is at stake if you don't follow through? Who are you letting down when you give in to comfort? Who are you becoming when you choose effort over ease? Start there. Let that question guide you, and then act. Not because it feels good, not because you feel like it, but because the person you want to become is worth it. Discipline is hard, but it gets easier when your why is clear. And when your why is clear, everything else slowly but surely falls into place. Confidence isn't something we're born with. It's not an inherited trait or a gift only a few people get. Confidence is earned, built, shaped over time. And it's built the same way anything valuable is built, through consistency. And those people think confidence comes from achievements. They believe that once they get the job, land the deal, win the game, or receive the praise, then they'll feel confident. But that's not how it works, because those wins are fleeting. They're moments, not foundations. And if your confidence is built only on moments, then it will disappear just as quickly as it came. True confidence doesn't come from results. It comes from showing up over and over again, especially when it's hard, especially when there are no results yet. Think about the first time you tried anything new. Maybe it was giving a presentation, learning an instrument, starting a workout routine, or building a business. You probably didn't feel confident. You probably felt awkward, unsure, maybe even embarrassed. That's normal. That's what starting looks like. But every time you showed up, you grew. Not because you were great, but because you were consistent. Consistency is what tells your brain, I can trust myself. That's where real confidence begins. In the quiet decision to keep your promises to yourself. When you say you're going to do something and then you actually do it, something powerful happens. You don't just move forward in your goals, you start believing in yourself. And belief is where confidence is born. I once met a young man who was trying to become a public speaker, but he was terrified of speaking. His hands would shake, his voice would tremble, he would second guess every sentence before he even spoke it, but he had a mission. He wanted to help young people overcome anxiety, something he had struggled with most of his life. So he started small. Every week, he filmed a short video sharing one idea. He hated watching himself. Most people didn't even watch the videos, but he didn't stop. Every week, one video, no matter how he felt. After 3 months, something shifted. He didn't just sound better, he felt better. His voice was stronger. His words were more clear. He still got nervous, but he stopped doubting himself. And when he finally stood on a real stage to speak in front of a crowd, he wasn't relying on hype or tricks. He was relying on something much stronger, a track record with himself. He had done the work. Over and over again, that's where his confidence came from. We live in a world obsessed with outcomes. We glorify the results, the trophy, the recognition, the applause, but we forget the reps. The daily choices, the grind that no one sees. Confidence isn't built in the spotlight, it's built in the shadows, when no one's watching and you decide to show up anyway. Consistency is not about perfection. It's not about doing everything right, it's about staying in the game. Even when you fall, even when you fail, especially when you don't feel like it. Because every time you keep going, you reinforce the belief, I don't quit on myself. And this is important. Consistency isn't rigid. It's not robotic. It's not doing the same thing forever without adaptation. It's about staying connected to the mission while being flexible in your method. It's not about being stubborn. It's about being committed. Big difference. Here's what's really interesting. When you're consistent, it's not just your confidence that grows. Other people's confidence in you grows too. When people see you show up again and again, they start to trust you, they believe in you, they depend on you. And trust is the foundation of leadership. We don't follow people because they're loud. We don't follow people because they're perfect. We follow people because they're reliable, because we know they'll be there when it counts. And reliability is built through, you guessed it, consistency. I remember speaking with a CEO who had taken a company through a brutal downturn. The market had crashed, morale was low, and everyone was looking for answers. He didn't have all the answers, but every morning at 7:30 a.m. he stood in the same place and gave a 5-minute update, even when the news was bad, even when there was no change. And over time, his team didn't just respect him, they trusted him because he showed up. Not once, not when it was easy, but every day. That kind of consistency creates emotional safety. And where there's emotional safety, there's resilience. There's confidence. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout. It's quiet, steady, grounded. And it doesn't say, I am the best. It says, I've been here before. I can do this again. But here's the part we miss. Consistency isn't something you suddenly gain overnight. It's a muscle. You train it, you build it, and you build it in the small moments. When you get up 5 minutes earlier to make time for your craft, when you finish the last set even though your legs are tired, when you send the email you've been avoiding, it's those little acts repeated over time that create the foundation of unshakable confidence. Confidence is earned privately before it's recognized publicly. And if you want to be someone who stands strong when it matters, who leads with clarity, who takes bold action, who inspires others, you can't wait for confidence to show up. You build it with discipline, with consistency, with daily deliberate effort. So the next time you feel unsure of yourself, the next time you question your worth, your voice, your value, don't chase a feeling, chase a habit. Do the thing you said you'd do, and then do it again tomorrow. Because every time you show up, you're not just getting better, you're becoming someone you can believe in. And once you believe in yourself, truly believe, everything begins to change. Success rarely looks like what we think it does. It's easy to imagine that breakthrough moments are sudden, explosive, or magical. That something just clicks, that the right person sees your work, or the right door opens, or the right idea finally lands, and everything changes. And yes, sometimes that moment happens. But what we don't talk about enough is what leads up to it, because it's never just one moment. It's never just one decision. It's hundreds, sometimes thousands of small, invisible efforts, ones that seemed insignificant at the time, but they weren't. The truth is, the work you're doing now, the emails you're writing, the early mornings, the uncomfortable calls, the things no one claps for, it's all part of something bigger, even if you don't see it yet. We live in a world that celebrates instant results. We scroll through highlight reels, we see the wins, the followers, the finished product, but we don't see the late nights. We don't see the 10th draft. We don't see the failures that were necessary for that final version to even exist. And so we get fooled into thinking that if results don't come fast, we must be doing something wrong. That if we're not seeing progress, it means there isn't any. But that's a lie. Progress doesn't always show up as something you can measure. Sometimes it shows up as who you're becoming. And that matters more than you think. I once met a young woman who wanted to be a writer. She was passionate, thoughtful, and full of ideas. But every time she started writing, she'd stop after a few days. She said, what's the point? No one reads it. Nothing's happening. I asked her, what are you expecting to happen? He said, I just want to feel like it matters. That's what most of us want, is feel like the work we're doing matters. But here's the thing, meaning doesn't always arrive right away. Sometimes you write for a year before someone says, that helped me. Sometimes you build something for 5 years before anyone pays attention. Sometimes you plant seeds that won't bloom until much later, but the effort is never wasted. It's compounding, quietly, invisibly. Every day you show up, you're adding weight to your work. It's like filling a jar with drops of water. At first, it seems like nothing's happening. The jar is still empty, but one day, suddenly, it's full, and then it overflows, but only if you keep showing up. Small efforts don't just add up, they multiply. Because every time you do something hard, you don't just get the benefit of the action, you get the benefit of who you become from doing it. You become more patient, more resilient, more disciplined. And those qualities spill into everything else you do. The problem is we often quit too soon, not because we lack ability, but because we lose sight of the process. We think, if I don't see results, I'm not growing. But growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it looks like you're struggling through a task that used to paralyze you. Sometimes it's the fact that you didn't give up even when everything in you wanted to. That's real progress. And it's easy to overlook, especially when the world tells you to chase speed. But speed isn't the answer. Depth is. And depth is only developed through repetition, through going back to the work even when it's boring, even when it's slow, even when there's no finish line in sight. I remember hearing the story of a man who spent 27 years in a small studio painting every day. No one knew his name, no one bought his work, but he kept painting, not for fame, not for praise, but because he believed in the process. One day, a gallery owner stumbled across one of his pieces. Within a year, the artist's work was being shown internationally. People called it an overnight success, but it wasn't. It was nearly 3 decades of unrecognized effort that finally caught up with him. The world just saw the result, not the repetition that made it possible. That's the power of compounding effort. It may be quiet for a long time, but it's never meaningless. There's something else that happens when you commit to small, consistent effort. You separate yourself. Because most people give up. Most people get tired. Most people want the shortcut. They want the viral moment. They want the hack. But you, if you're willing to keep going, if you're willing to do the work that others won't, you build something they can't. That's what shows up in the room long before the breakthrough does. People trust it, they feel it, they're drawn to it because it's rare. You don't need to be extraordinary to create something extraordinary. You just need to be consistent, committed, patient. You need to believe that today's small effort matters, even when it feels invisible. The moments that change your life won't always feel like it when they're happening. Sometimes they feel like writing one more paragraph, practicing one more hour, making one more call, saying yes one more time. But each of those efforts, those drops in the jar, are building towards something you can't yet see, something real. So if you're tired, keep going. If you're doubting, keep showing up. If you're wondering whether the work matters, trust that it does. Because one day you'll look back and realize the breakthrough didn't come from a single moment of genius. It came from all the times you refused to quit, from all the small efforts that didn't feel like much at the time, but were everything. That's when it all starts to fall into place. We spend a lot of time trying to figure things out before we begin. We want the perfect plan, the full blueprint, the guaranteed outcome. And until we get that, we hesitate, we analyze, we second guess, we wait. But clarity doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing, it comes from taking action, not after everything makes sense, but often before it does. There's this idea that you have to know before you start, know your exact purpose, know the right strategy, know where the road leads. But that's not how life actually works. In fact, most people who do meaningful work didn't begin with certainty. They began with curiosity. They began with a feeling that there was something worth exploring, worth trying. And it was only by stepping into the unknown that they figured out what they were really here to do. It's a bit like walking through fog. From a distance, you can't see anything, just a wall of gray. But as you take one step and then another, more of the path becomes visible. That's what action does. It doesn't give you all the answers, but it gives you enough to take the next step, and then the next. There's something powerful about momentum. It has a way of revealing what standing still can't. You write the first page, and suddenly the next page becomes possible. You make the first call, and the next one doesn't feel so intimidating. You try something new, and you learn something, even if it's what not to do. But that learning only happens when you move. We often fear making the wrong choice, so we make no choice at all. But indecision is not safety. It's just a slow form of self-doubt. It convinces us that we're being careful when really we're avoiding discomfort. And discomfort is a necessary part of clarity. You have to be willing to get it wrong, to try something that doesn't work, to fail. Because in doing so, you gain something far more valuable than a perfect track record. You gain insight. I once spoke to a woman who left a high-paying corporate job to start her own business. She didn't have a business background. She didn't have investors or a 5-year plan. What she had was a feeling a belief that the work she was doing wasn't aligned with the person she wanted to be. So she left. Not recklessly, thoughtfully. She gave herself 6 months to experiment, to explore, to try. She started small, a side project, then a few clients. She adjusted, shifted, stumbled, but slowly something began to emerge. A direction, a voice, a calling. She said, I didn't know this was what I was meant to do until I started doing it. The clarity didn't come first. The action did. And that's what people don't always understand. You don't need all the answers to start. You just need to be brave enough to begin. Because action isn't just a strategy, it's a teacher. Every step you take gives you information. Every attempt, even the ones that fail, brings you closer to understanding what works and what doesn't. And that understanding, that's what creates clarity. You can read every book, watch every tutorial, listen to every podcast, and still be stuck. Because information isn't transformation, it's execution that changes you. It's movement that sharpens your vision. When you step into the work, when you show up even when it's uncertain, you gain something you can't get from planning: perspective. That perspective is what guides you. It helps you make better choices. It helps you course correct. It helps you know when to keep going and when to pivot. But again, it doesn't come first. It comes through action. Some of the most successful people I've met didn't start by saying, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. They started with something small, a project, a conversation, a need they noticed. They didn't wait for the entire path to reveal itself. They just followed what felt meaningful. And as they did, more clarity came. That clarity gave them confidence, and that confidence allowed them to lead. Leadership isn't about always knowing. It's about being willing to move even when you don't. It's about setting things in motion and trusting that in the process, direction will emerge. I once worked with a team that was launching a product no one had built before. There were doubts, questions, debates. The temptation was to delay, to wait until every unknown had been resolved. But their leader made a different choice. He said, let's build a small version and get feedback. Let's learn by doing. That small version wasn't perfect, but it got them moving. It gave them real-world feedback. And within weeks, they had a level of insight they never could have reached through meetings or spreadsheets. That's the gift of action. It brings the abstract into focus. It turns ideas into experiences. It turns fear into growth. And yes, there will be mistakes. There will be setbacks. But those aren't signs you're doing it wrong. They're signs you're learning. Every failure is a form of feedback. Every misstep gives you data. And data is what fuels clarity. So don't wait for the fog to clear before you begin. Step into it. Take the first imperfect action. Trust that movement, even small movement, matters. That progress, even slow progress, reveals the path. If you don't know what to do, do something. Write the email, make the call, take the class, start the habit. Don't try to leap the whole staircase. Just find the next step. And remember, clarity isn't a destination. It's a byproduct of engagement. You don't think your way into clarity, you act your way into it. When you start moving, everything starts aligning. You notice things you didn't see before. People show up, ideas evolve. And the fog, it doesn't disappear all at once, but slowly, one step at a time, it lifts. That's when everything begins to fall into place. Discipline is often misunderstood. We talk about it like it's punishment, like it's some kind of harsh regime, like it's supposed to make us suffer. But that's not what discipline really is. Discipline is love. Love for your future self. It's not restriction, it's devotion. It's the daily choice to act in alignment with who you want to become, even when it's uncomfortable. We live in a world that praises freedom and flexibility, and those are beautiful things. But without discipline, freedom becomes chaos. Without structure, flexibility becomes aimlessness. And when the time comes to do something hard, to chase a dream, to lead others, to make a difference, the only thing that will carry you through the resistance is discipline. Discipline is not something you're born with. It's not a personality trait. It's a decision, one that you make every day, sometimes every hour, to keep a promise to yourself. And not just any promise, but the kind that shapes who you're becoming. You don't need discipline to dream big. You need it to build big. Because dreams without discipline are just wishes. They sound good, but they don't go anywhere. What moves the needle is showing up when the motivation is gone. It's doing the work when no one's watching. It's choosing consistency over convenience. I once met a young man who wanted to be a professional athlete. He wasn't the most naturally gifted. In fact, most of his teammates were faster, stronger, more talented. But he had something they didn't: relentless discipline. He woke up at 5 a.m. every day to train, not because he felt like it, but because he had made a promise to his future self, a promise that said, I won't let you down. Over time, something remarkable happened. The gap between him and the others started to close. And then he passed them, not because he was better, but because he was consistent, because he was committed, because he was willing to do what most people won't. That's what discipline gives you, an edge. Not over others, but over the part of yourself that wants to quit. It silences the excuses. It quiets the fear. It replaces I don't feel like it with I said I would. Discipline is the opposite of impulsiveness. It's what allows you to delay gratification for something greater. It's what allows you to say no to distractions so you can say yes to purpose. And when you build that muscle, when you strengthen that internal resolve, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. We often admire people who've accomplished great things. But what we're really admiring is their discipline, their ability to stay the course, to keep showing up, to stay grounded in something bigger than a mood or a moment. I once asked a Navy SEAL what separated the ones who made it through training from the ones who didn't. He said it wasn't strength, it wasn't intelligence, it was commitment. The ones who made it were the ones who decided they weren't going to quit no matter how hard it gets. That's discipline, a decision renewed again and again to stay loyal to a deeper goal. The truth is, you won't always be inspired. You won't always be excited. There will be days when the goal feels far, when the process feels heavy, when quitting looks easier than continuing. That's when discipline speaks. It whispers, remember why you started. Discipline is the bridge between intention and impact. You can want to be a better leader, a better parent, a better artist, a better version of yourself, but without discipline, it's just potential. And potential without action slowly turns into regret. But here's the beauty of it. Discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about returning. It's about coming back to the promise. When you mess up, and you will, you don't abandon the mission. You recommit. You get back on track. You keep going. Discipline teaches you to be trustworthy with yourself. And that trust builds confidence. Because when you know you'll do what you said you'd do, even when it's hard, you start to believe in your own strength. That belief carries into everything. There's also something deeply human about watching someone walk with discipline. You can feel it. It's in the way they move, the way they speak, the way they show up when no one else wants to. People follow that, they respect it. Because discipline creates integrity, and integrity is magnetic. I remember talking with a founder who had built a company from nothing. He said the turning point wasn't when they raised money or launched the product or hit a milestone. It was a season where everything was going wrong. Team members left, revenue stalled, he was tired, discouraged, burned out. But every day he got up, opened his laptop, and gave what he could. Even when it was just a little, even when it felt pointless. That season, he said, was when I became the leader I had only talked about being. Discipline doesn't look dramatic. It often looks quiet, mundane, ordinary. It's waking up early, making the call, writing the page, saying no to the easy out. It's not sexy, but it's sacred. Because every time you choose discipline, you're saying,